Despite a gut-wrenching loss on Tuesday, the Pittsburgh Pirates won their fourth consecutive series, this time over the St. Louis Cardinals. We're going to discuss all of that on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every single day. It is your podcast every single day. Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, brought to you from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Make sure the next time you book a trip this summer, maybe even to your rival city, that it is with Booking.com. Sorry for the lack of an episode yesterday. I was working all day, didn't have time. Apologies for that. Was able to watch the game at work, though. It was a very fun game for the Pittsburgh Pirates yesterday, winning 5-0 over the St. Louis Cardinals in a shutout victory to clinch their fourth consecutive series victory in between the All-Star break. We've seen them beat the Brewers now, the White Sox, the Phillies, and now the Cardinals. So they head to Arizona. We'll be talking about that more on tomorrow's show and a little bit later in this show today about how they can use this momentum going into this massive stretch. But there was a lot to talk about with this series, and it seems like there's a lot to talk about with almost every series now that the Pirates are playing, because they're just in it. They really are. They are right in the middle of this race for the NL wild card. The Atlanta Braves are starting to kind of have a little bit of a fall off, which is starting to open up 3 wild card spots now, which is something that a month ago I wouldn't have told you. I would have just told you that this was going to be 7 teams fighting for 2 spots or 8 teams fighting for 2 spots. Now all of a sudden it's starting to look like 9 or 10 teams fighting for 3. So the NL wild card continues to get nuts, and right now your Pittsburgh Pirates keep rolling. They've won 10 of their last 13 games. They've won 4 straight series. They continue to just find ways to win. And with the trade deadline now under a week away, you could expect some change coming up soon. We're going to talk about that later on the show on why I think that this weekend is going to be when a lot of this stuff is going to start to ramp up. But before we get to yesterday's game, the win that did clinch the series, I do want to talk about Paul Skenes for a minute, because I was at the game Tuesday. Phenomenal atmosphere, 32,000 people for a Tuesday night game against a divisional rival. It just really felt like baseball in Pittsburgh was back during that game. It really did. Now, you obviously do have a new crop of fans, which if you're a new crop of fans to this show, thank you. Also, thank you to all of my everydayers that listen to this show every day, like you, Mr. Mark Grove, who I work with alongside the Johnstown Mill Rats. But it felt like a playoff atmosphere in that game. And don't get me wrong either. The Pirates did lose the game. It was a frustrating loss, a gut-wrenching loss, but it was still a very good, very well-played baseball game from both sides. Nolan Arenado has the home run to put the Cardinals up in the 5th, to put them up 1-0. The Pirates bounce back 1-1. But then what we're going to talk about now is what happened. Paul Skenes was great on Tuesday. He really was. He got his first loss. You knew it was going to happen. He was never going to go undefeated throughout his entire career. Even the best in the league, like Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, Garrett Cole, all of them have all had their respective losses and their respective blow-up starts. What was interesting about this is this wasn't a blow-up start. This was a very strong start from Paul Skenes, a start that saw him go into the game in the 9th inning, which at the time, as a fan, because at the end of the day, I am a fan too. I cover this team every day for all of you, but I am still a fan at heart. I was electric. I said, yep, let's do it. Then for some reason, he threw the first pitch, and I immediately said, this is a mistake. And Jim Stam, great guy, does the Pirates fan forum over on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Phenomenal show you guys need to check out. It's actually on later today, so make sure you go check that out. We both looked at each other and we said, Derek Shelton made that decision as a fan and not a manager. Now, all of this is kind of hindsight. If Paul Skenes goes out there and shuts the door and pitches 9 complete innings and the Pirates win that game, I'm sure the conversation's a little different. I think even if that would have happened, would have some discourse about this, because Paul Skenes, we already had the conversation in Milwaukee when he got pulled with the no-hitter. I was perfectly fine with that. I thought it was the right decision. His pitch count was too high. The Brewers had seen him a couple times, and that was that. On Tuesday, when he entered into the 9th inning, that was the 4th time that he was going through the order. I get it, folks. Paul Skenes is an enigma. He is a phenom. He is something unlike Pirates fans or even baseball fans have ever seen. But when you see the same guy on the same night 4 times, you're eventually bound to figure it out. And that's what the Cardinals did. They figured it out. They went up 2-1. Now, obviously, a lot of this would say, oh, you're blaming it on Skenes. I'm not blaming it on Skenes at all. It was on the offense for not giving him offensive run support. That is a game you do not lose when your starter goes into the 9th inning in a tie ball game. It is not a game you lose. But to add further context to why I was so frustrated with this, David Bednar, Aroldis Chapman, and Colin Holderman were all available. All 3 of them. Because the night before, mind you, in a 2-1 game, Derek Shelton chose to go with Aroldis Chapman and David Bednar. They threw a combined 24 pitches in that day before. Chapman had 13, Bednar had 11. They were available and ready for you to go. I was sitting in left field on Tuesday, and I looked over to the bullpen and saw David Bednar up. I saw Aroldis Chapman up. They were ready to go into the game and at least get the game to the bottom of the 9th with the game tied. Now, not saying they wouldn't have given up runs, which is where all this gets convoluted because it's all hindsight now. But I think it just would have been a better decision to utilize your bullpen, which, mind you, folks, has actually been really, really good as of late, and use it. Paul Skenes would have left the game without a loss, thanks to Nick Gonzalez, mind you, and that would have set up a lot of different things, because you could have brought in Chapman with Siani coming in as the first hitter as a lefty. The Cardinals likely would have probably pinch hit him, but either way, Chapman's looked good lately. Bednar's looked really good lately. What good do they do you sitting in the bullpen? None. Awesome moment, bad managerial decision. That's all I'll say about it as far as the Paul Skenes thing is concerned. But then you go to Wednesday's game, which a lot of people, I think, were kind of clinching a little bit because of what happened the night before, and they felt like that was the game to win this series, and it almost felt like we were staring down the tunnel of another series loss to the St. Louis Cardinals. But then Martin Perez came out of nowhere and kind of reverted back to what he was doing at the beginning of the year, which I want to remind a lot of people that Martin Perez was doing really good when the season started. He was one of the pillars of this rotation when the season started, and he had the injury, and since he's been off and on. Yesterday, 6 innings pitched, 5 walks, 2 Ks, no earned runs on 4 hits. Phenomenal game. You hand it over to Majinski, 1 strikeout, scoreless inning. Holderman, 1 strikeout, scoreless inning. Chapman, 2 walks, but guess what? Scoreless inning. They win the series anyway, and they kept rolling. And this is what they have to do right now. I mean, you look at the live standings as we are recording this. They're a game out of the final wild card, but things are starting to tighten up. The Braves only have a 2-game advantage on St. Louis, who has the final wild card. You look at San Diego right now at 54-50. You look at Arizona at 53-50. Those last 2 teams, they're going to be playing here over the next couple weeks. 9 of their next 12 games are against Arizona and San Diego. So these series wins are big because they're letting the Pirates continue to build momentum. And on top of that, with what you would expect to happen here soon with trades, the Pirates are only going to get better. And that's a very good thing. And where their strength is right now is obviously the rotation. You have Keller, you have Skenes, you'll be getting Falter back soon. You have Jones coming back soon. Priester could even be an option. Ortiz, you're not taking him out of the rotation right now. How about Marco Gonzalez and Martin Perez? Well, with all these options, is there a move that could be coming down the line, and why will the rotation continue to be the strength? We'll discuss on today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Make sure you get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trade, supplyhouse.com. Supply House is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical product needs online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Pros in the skills trade can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today because with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports. That could be Steelers, Pirates, or Penguins, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You could save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, or even sections with zone deals. You can get all-in pricing when you toggle that feature, and it shows you your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets for less. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure after you make Locked On Pirates your first listen of the day, that you make Locked On Sports Today your second, because Locked On Sports Today is giving you all of the news that you need on everything going on in the world of sports on Amazon Fire TV and YouTube. Also, check out Locked On Steelers. The Steelers reported to training camp yesterday, so things are going on down there. Chris Carter doing a phenomenal job covering all that here for Locked On. And also make sure you check out the Locked On MLB podcast with Sully, where he's covering everything that's going to be happening over the course of the next week as far as the trade deadline is concerned and as the pennant races continue to heat up. So we talked about Martin Perez heating up a little bit, and this rotation continues to be a talking point for this Pirates team for a very good reason. I mean, you have Paul Skenes, who has been doing phenomenal things as a rookie. You have Mitch Keller, who still continued to be a steady presence in this rotation and will continue to do so for years to come. You have Jared Jones, who, albeit on the injured list right now, was also phenomenal even before Paul Skenes got here and was placing himself in the Rookie of the Year conversation before he kind of slowed down, maybe due to fatigue. You also still have Bailey Falter, who should be returning here shortly soon as well. Has been a very big surprise for this team, arguably the biggest surprise of the year for the Pittsburgh Pirates. It has been a steady left-handed rotation option for them. And then you have Luis Ortiz, who I'd also consider a very big surprise. And on a show last week, I mentioned that Luis Ortiz has been a player that you look at and you kind of say, this is what we wanted to see last year. This is kind of like the 2022 version that we saw of Luis Ortiz coming up through the minor league system whenever he was just going on a crazy tear down there and eventually making his debut. So you break all this down and you say, okay, you have all these options. You could look, I'd say, at 8 options that you have for this rotation right now if everybody was healthy. Skenes, Keller, Jones, Falter, Ortiz, Gonzalez, Priester, Perez. That's 8 options that you have. So it's not out of the cards that you could see a Marco Gonzalez trade for a lottery ticket. You could see the same thing for Martin Perez. There's obviously other teams that are in this race for the National League playoffs and the American League playoffs that could use a left-handed starter like Gonzalez or Perez. And for the Pittsburgh Pirates, I don't think you exactly feel too worried about it if you trade those guys away, because as I already mentioned, you have a guy in Bailey Falter who's looked really good this year, has been that steady left-handed option that you've been looking for. And then on top of that, you've had the Luis Ortiz emergence and what he's been able to do in the rotation as far as what he did Saturday. Oh my Lord, I still love what he did Saturday against the Philadelphia Phillies. And then you have Quinn Priester, who has been appearing a little bit as kind of a piggyback behind Marco Gonzalez, but you could start him if you need to as well. So once you start getting some of these guys back, the rotation is going to continue to be a strength. And that's very much in part to just the amount of options that they have available. And that's before I even start mentioning guys like Braxton Ashcraft, who could make an appearance later this year if needed, maybe even a Bubba Chandler and a cameo start in September. You look at some of this stuff that you talk about and you say, man, there's a lot of teams across baseball that probably wish that they had the options that the Pirates have in their rotation right now. And really, the rotation, as I've said on this show plenty of times, is the reason why this Pirates team is where they're at. This is why the Pirates are in a competitive spot, is because of this rotation. And the offense, which we obviously know needs to be addressed ahead of this trade deadline coming up on Wednesday, you look at it and you say, okay, how are things going to work out here? How are things going to shape out? And the rotation, I think, is the spot where you don't really have to worry all that much because almost everything you have there is fine. And what I think is even more impressive that I don't see a lot of people talk about all that much about this rotation is that it's a rotation that has been pretty much home built. It's a home built rotation. I mean, Keller has been here forever. Skenes was drafted last year. Jones was drafted in 2022. Priester was a draft pick out of this team. Ortiz, I believe, was also a draft pick out of this team as well. So all these guys outside of Falter, Gonzalez, and Perez have been guys that you've homegrown here and kind of built with over the last couple of years or the last couple of months even. And that's what I think is most impressive about this, is because then you're going to have this same problem going into next year, but you're going to be throwing guys back into the fold like Johan Oviedo or a Mike Burrows or Braxton Ashcraft. And then later in 2025, you're going to be talking about Bubba Chandler and Anthony Solometo. You're going to be talking about a lot of these guys, and you're going to have to find spots for them. And that's where I think that this rotation, not only this season, is going to continue to be a strength, but it's going to be a strength for probably the next 2 or 3 years at least, even with injuries in mind, because they just have so many pitchers available that I don't think you would really wince at if you see them go out and pitch on the mound at PNC Park. And that's a big thing. It really is, because a lot of these teams that don't spend money that much, like the Pittsburgh Pirates, usually have to go into free agency and do this. You saw them do that the last 3 seasons with Perez, Gonzalez, Anderson, and Quintana, and even Rich Hill. They had to go out and find left-handed options because they just didn't have them available, and they can't throw a ton of money at these starters. Now, we'll see what they eventually do with Paul Skenes way down the line, but we're not going to talk about that. That's something a whole different conversation. But when you have such a fluid and deep system as far as pitching is concerned, that's what this offers you, is you have the identity of having a very strong rotation with a ton of options available to you that is going to continue to be a strength for you for years to come. And it's going to be a strength this year, even if they decide to make moves with Martin Perez or Marco Gonzalez, or even a Bailey Falter if they decide to do it, if they wanted to do something like that. And that's what I find so interesting about this team, is going into this next 6 days where they have the trade deadline and there are things available. You know what your needs are. Pitching isn't one of them. And if you want to back up this pitching staff, you're going to have to make some moves. And I think we could be coming up on when these moves are going to start because we don't really have a choice. But is this weekend going to be when we start seeing things heat up on the hot stove? We're going to discuss that on the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always really wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're even talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. Folks, I might be going to New York at the end of the year if the Pirates are in it in September. And if I'm going to be going to New York, it can get a little pricey, but I could find the best prices on Booking.com. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. So book today on Booking.com on the website or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 because you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 while watching Team USA rack up the gold medals this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup of players across basketball, soccer, tennis, golf, and more in as little as 60 seconds. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. Folks, basketball starts tonight at the Summer Games, so make sure you follow LeBron James because you can just bet on LeBron James to score a singular point in tonight's game against France, I believe it is. So make sure you do that in one of the 30 states that Prize Picks is available in. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. And thank you all for always tuning in to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. And as I always mention, your Pittsburgh Pirates are right in the middle of this NL wildcard race in the National League, where there are a lot of teams that are still involved. There are a lot of teams that are still trying to figure out what they're going to be doing over the next 6 days. Are they going to be conservative buyers? Are they going to just go all the way buy? Are they going to go all the way sell? Are they going to be conservative sellers? Are they going to buy and sell? These are all the questions you're going to hear over the next 6 days. But 6 days, that's all that's left for these teams, including the Pittsburgh Pirates, to continue to be on the phone line and see what they're going to do as far as trades are concerned. And this trade deadline, as I've mentioned plenty of times, is very interesting. It's a trade deadline where more than likely the buyer's market is going to outweigh the seller's market. That's just how it is. You're going to see teams get creative in some of these deals. I think you're going to see a lot of MLB for MLB deals this trade deadline, especially as it pertains to teams that are not outright selling, but, maybe looking forward to the future. And I think the Pirates kind of fit that mold. I could see them potentially moving on from a guy like, Liover Peguero, who on another team would be a starting shortstop or a starting second baseman, but he just isn't here with how well Nick Gonzalez and O'Neal Cruz have played. I could see them move on from a guy like G1 Bay potentially, who another team might say, hey, we'd love to have a speedster who can just slap hit and get on base if he can figure it out. These are the kind of things that I want people to continue to think about when we're discussing the trade deadline. And I even just replied to somebody on Twitter during that ad break there that I get kind of rather annoyed when I see people say, oh, look, here is X player. Is he worth this prospect, and sometimes it'll be Termar Johnson, sometimes it'll be Jack Brannigan, sometimes it'll be Bubba Chandler, sometimes it'll be so-and-so. And the short answer to that question, is X MLB player worth X prospect, is always yes. I mean, always yes. If you can get a known commodity that you think can help you win right now, and all it takes is for a guy that has never stepped foot on a Major League Baseball field, you always do it. That's the short answer. The more complex, convoluted, long answer is sometimes that answer is no. Do you feel comfortable trading Bubba Chandler for Randy Arozarena? Do you feel comfortable trading Termar Johnson for Jazz Chisholm? Do you feel comfortable trading Thomas Harrington for Luis Robert Jr.? Do you feel comfortable doing those things? As fans, we say yes, but as a general manager, as a front office, you have to do your due diligence when you're making deals like this, because if you just went and traded your prospects willy-nilly all the time, you're not going to really get anywhere. We're not the Dodgers. There's a select few teams that can do that. The Dodgers, the Yankees, because they could just buy what they want. Now, even on that end, the Yankees, for example, I think this is a great example, have not moved on from Jason Dominguez. They have not moved on from Spencer Jones because they see those guys as future pieces to the roster. And also, another thing that I want to urge people with over the course of these next 6 days is just remember that the value that you're putting on a player, like, for instance, Jazz Chisholm, is likely not the value of that player as far as general managers and teams see that player. That could be the value being higher. That could be the value being lower. That's just how this all works. Because whatever we see the value of a player as, Ben Cherington doesn't see that. He may see it similarly, but I don't think that he's thinking, oh yeah, Jazz Chisholm gets us to a World Series, so we have to give up everything to get him. I'm here to tell you, any piece that they get does not guarantee that this Pirates team gets to the World Series. No trade that they make guarantees they even get to the playoffs. That's why I would say that I want this to, as far as how the Pirates handle this, I want them to handle it with an eye to the future. Get guys that have team control through 2026 or 2027 even. And if that price is high, then so be it. It's like playing poker, folks. You can't win if you don't play. You got to push your chips in sometimes. You got to take a risk. And I know the last time they had the Chris Archer trade, and that scares a lot of people, but I'm also here to tell you this front office does not give a damn about that. They don't care. That trade has no meaning to anything that the Pirates do over the course of the next week. And on top of all this, I think you're going to see things start to heat up this weekend. I think this weekend there are a lot of crucial series going on this weekend. I think you're going to really start to see things really heat up because, I mean, Pirates D-backs, big series. Tigers Twins, big series. Guardians Phillies, big series. Rays Reds, massive series. Padres Orioles, massive series. The Rangers are still trying to catch up to Seattle and Houston against the Blue Jays. Massive series. Atlanta and New York. That is a huge series for this National League wildcard race. Yankees Red Sox in the American League is a massive series. The Red Sox could almost catch the New York Yankees at this point. Cubs Royals, big series. Dodgers Astros, big series. The Mariners and White Sox, albeit the White Sox are a selling team, the Mariners are still trying to keep pace in that AL West. Marlins Brewers, pretty decent big series. NL wildcard wise, Nationals Cardinals, big series. I mean, there's just so much that's going on this week that I think a lot of teams are going to start to feel the pressure to make a move because of these games that are coming up. And the fact that the trade deadline is on Wednesday, July 31st. So I think you're going to start seeing things heat up this weekend. And of course, here on the Locked On Pirates podcast, we will be covering all of it. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in, as you always do here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. Find this show on YouTube and all of your audio platforms because it is free and available to you every single day. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow to discuss the Arizona Diamondbacks series and anything else going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. But until then, folks, we'll see you on the flip side.